This is the Relentless Podcast. My name is Christine. I'm a small business owner and student of success. I have become obsessed with talking with other entrepreneurs about their strategies, struggles, tactics, and routines. One of the key qualities that all of these individuals have in common, their ability to be relentless. Welcome back to the Relentless Podcast. I'm Christine Van Duzen, and I am joined here by local attorney Jessica Serrett. Welcome to the show, Jessica.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I'm excited because you're one of the few guests that we've had that reached out to me after being a listener, and so I was so excited to sit down and talk to you. You've been a customer at my store before, but there's a lot about your story that I want to unpack. So why don't we start with who you are, where you're from, and how you got to become an attorney?
Great, thank you. So yeah, I am Jessica Serrett. I grew up in Newark, which is pretty nearby the Finger Lakes, but I've lived in Geneva probably the better part of about 10 years.
Okay.
It's actually because of some entrepreneurs how I ended up in Geneva.
Okay.
I was a new attorney and was kind of in the process of finding a way to grow my business and figure out, where I wanted to land career-wise.
Sure.
And I was leaning on a lot of friends who also were entrepreneurs. So specifically at the time was really great friends with D&J Fitzgerald. They owned Geneva Foreign and Sports.
Yeah.
And so, they were kind of my tips club of sorts. Mm-hmm. We would go to Oysters at the Red Dove back in the day and talk about, about business deals, about, what was kind of on the horizon, any big decisions. I would kind of lean on them to see about their experiences and what they thought.
Sure.
So I think gaining advice from other entrepreneurs is great. And I just found that my social circle, especially of professionals, was growing in Geneva. And so I figured, why don't I just live here, make my life here? And at the time, I was actually working for a publishing company in legal, editing legal encyclopedia.
Okay.
Pretty probably boring on the scale of legal jobs, but, I'm a super nerd, so I liked it.
Yeah.
But when I passed the bar and became admitted, I remember I was having a lobster roll and a glass of wine at Parker's on a Friday afternoon.
Okay.
I had a half a day that I took off. And at the time it was this Fridays only thing that they did. And I remember sitting there thinking, I want to do this every Friday for the rest of my life. But I had no more personal leave. So I went in on Monday and I put in my notice.
Oh, wow.
Started up my own practice and then pretty much never had time for lunch ever again. So,
yeah.
That was kind of how it went.
That is definitely the myth. I mean, everyone says, I want to work for myself so that I can decide when I want to work. But they don't realize that, you have no time.
No time.
It's the meme of, you get to pick which 18 hours a day you decide to work. So.
True.
But wow, that's interesting. So we have Parker's and their lobster rolls to thank for you
For sure.
going out on your own.
Yeah.
Well, and that's fascinating because one of the things that you see a lot of times with doctors, with attorneys, is they're in school for all this time. They have all this training. They're obviously very intellectual and very capable. But those things don't always translate into running an office because it's essentially a business. So do you have any challenges, or did you, when you started out, of finding leads? Were you all by word of mouth? How did you grow your practice?
Yeah, there was kind of a mix. At the time, I remember getting involved with Groupon, which was all the rage. And I had this $99 will package, kind of helped get people through the door.
Yeah.
Really, there's just so much need in our area. I found that in any of these kind of rural towns around us, there's just not a whole lot of attorneys. And so being somewhere where there's enough work to go around is great. I was renting space from Paul Blakely, who's a local attorney, and he really was a great mentor to me, kind of being there to have someone to lean on and ask questions to. I think when you're new, it's really hard to figure out, what you're worth. It's hard to know what to charge, and it's hard to, demand for people to pay you because you're not really maybe confident enough, thinking that you're worth the money that you're asking for.
Yeah.
So I think there's a curve that happens there as well. Leaning on your friends and family to be your clients is tough because it's awkward, right? Yep. Asking people to pay you under those circumstances. It's just a lot of word of mouth. I also went through periods of time where I would take, jobs either part-time or full-time with other agencies. So social services had a part-time opening in my home county. And so I took that position and then later took a full-time job, mostly fueled, the need for things like health insurance and student loan forgiveness. That was always a big consideration. The really incredible thing is entrepreneurship was always there for me. So
Okay.
when I would take a job and either, after a year or so, if things didn't work out or I needed a transition or, during times when I've lost my job, I always had myself to fall back on.
Yeah.
So there's been times that I've, been across the table from someone saying, you don't have a job anymore. And thinking to myself, well, you know what? Like I will be my own boss tomorrow. I don't
Yeah.
need to apply for unemployment. I can just go and trust myself and,
Yeah.
dust myself off. And that's something that I think has served me well. Entrepreneurship is just kind of always there for you.
Yeah, that's so valuable because, you basically aren't tied to anything. I feel like so many people are in jobs that they really don't love. Maybe they did when they started, or they just did it because they needed to make ends meet. And then 20 years later, they're like, oh, just living for the weekend, right? So
Right.
it's a really great position to be in to kind of have that flexibility and then, be gaining this valuable experience, but then also just have yourself to fall back on. So I worked for a few attorneys before I got into this, and they did a little bit of family law and, a lot of divorces and wills and things like that. Is there a particular area of the law that you're passionate about?
Yeah. So I think there is, a trend to try to like do a little of everything in the beginning to be like a hometown lawyer. Family law is really where my heart is.
Okay.
And right now I actually exclusively represent children.
Okay.
So I'm assigned by the courts in any, custody or visitation case, sometimes abuse and neglect matters. And I do a lot of juvenile delinquent work, which
Okay.
is really, I think, where my heart is.
Yeah.
And so, I'm able to kind of focus on my clients, take a really collaborative approach in a lot of cases, especially when parents don't elect to have attorneys themselves.
Right.
I can kind of serve as a mediator of sorts. When I'm representing the child, I hate to say this, but you're never the bad guy.
Right.
Even with the kids who are there because they're in trouble, they're still kids. And so I've found that that's a really fulfilling area for me to practice in. I, recently kind of decided at a very late stage in an interview process to not pursue a position in banking.
Okay.
Because again, I was thinking, we got the steady salary, you got the benefits, a consistent work day. For some people, that's a draw. For me, I just said to myself, like, I don't know if I'm going to feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's about, knowing what you want your day or your perfect week to look like. That's some advice I tend to give a lot of people. Draw it out. Do you want to do, yoga once a week? Do you want to go out to lunch once a week? How many, you want to be able to call your best friend on your way to work every day? All of these things can help you kind of design the life you want.
Right.
I remember having to give some advice at a career fair once at my alma mater, Cuca College.
Okay.
And, you always hear people say like, oh, do what you love and it'll never feel like work. I actually think that that's terrible advice.
Yes.
I feel like the advice is find the 9 to 5 that can afford the life you want from 5 to 9. And I don't necessarily mean afford in the financial sense, although
Right.
that might matter too. But if you want to be able to, to just kick up your feet from 5 to 9, then there are jobs that, that you might not be as passionate about, but you can put the stress away and leave it at work and shut the door.
Right.
But if you want to be able to spend the day with your dogs on your lap and be able to do, things like this,
Yeah.
have something different every day, which is important for me,
Yeah.
then, you can kind of select that way. So I think no matter what you're doing for work, if your life is the life you want outside of work, then I don't think you'll ever resent what you're doing for a career.
Yeah. Gosh, there's a lot there. And I agree with so much. I've mentioned before, I kind of stumbled in to what I'm doing. I didn't really design it. But once I started, even as chaotic and stressful as it was, there was a part of me that was like, I'm in the right place. And I had never felt that in any other job. And unfortunately for me, when you're building a business, and my husband is building a business, we sacrifice a lot. And there are weeks at a time where I don't take a single day off. I'm not able to. or we go away and we have to be available by phone. And so I almost think of things sometimes not so much by the day or by the week, but as, okay, what I call the success tax. I'm investing in this time now so that hopefully in a year or two things are going to be running better. And maybe I'm delusional. I don't know. It's quite possible, but I try to think to myself of, I grew up, my parents were not poor, but I did see, after my parents divorced, I saw my mom struggle a bit. And I remember just not even necessarily thinking about money. I don't know. I just knew I didn't want to struggle. I didn't want to be worrying about money. And interestingly enough, when I didn't finish college and I came back here trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, I was making very little money. And I just was not happy. And I could feel myself kind of slipping into that, like, okay, how can I just make enough so that we can go on 2 trips a year, we can go out to eat? And I just know myself, and that life isn't for me. And for some people, that's perfectly fine. And that's their dream. Their dream is to go to work 9 to 5, come home, be with their kids, do homework with their kids. And I think I've just come to the realization that, like, that's just not my life. And that's not a good path or a bad path. It's just, this is my path,
right,
Right. And so it's been challenging, but the fulfillment is high. I mean, so many times in the morning, I jump out of bed. And I know that sounds so cliche, but I can't wait to get to work. And like, after here's content day, I'm excited.
Yeah.
So, I mean, your husband is an entrepreneur as well, right? So you guys kind of have to balance some things, I would imagine.
Yeah. So John's owned JS Landscape going on like 22 years right now. So
Okay.
That is correct. We've had times where, depending on how his business is going, I can choose to take some financial risks or might have to consider, taking a certain job so that I've got the health insurance.
Right.
Those are always decisions we've had to make. But I think, honestly, post-pandemic and in the last couple of years, gosh, even in the last couple of weeks, I've adopted this like YOLO attitude.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but it's kind of like what you're saying. You need to find what it is that makes you happy. I know people who are taking jobs to say, well, I'm just going to do this job that I don't really like for 20 years and I'll get my pension. Lately, I've been losing friends. I mean, I'm not even 40 yet. And the people around me are suffering from major like health crises and, or passing away. And I feel like I'm going to be lucky if I even make it to retirement. I want to enjoy my life now.
Yeah.
And so I think that I'm at the point right now where I'm making those choices and encouraging my husband to do the same. You just can't spend your days, freaking out and being stressed or being unhappy for some future point where you think you're going to feel like, you made it or you got whatever it is that you're chasing.
Yeah. I know. And that is a balance that you have to find because I've had this conversation with someone too, and they're like, yeah, but so you're investing for your future, but what if that doesn't come? And I'm like, no, I actually, side story, I think about death an unhealthy amount, like very unhealthy amount. So I think about that all the time. And I've gotten to the point where I am okay with if I don't get to do all the things that I want on the bucket list, as long as I know that I am living a full and meaningful life on my terms.
Right.
And so, it's just a hard thing. And my mom laughs at me because she's like, you are way too young to be having thoughts like this. Like, you're 36. How are you in a midlife crisis? And I'm like, I'm on like my third. I mean, it's just, and I think COVID, unfortunately, just brought to light so many introspective thoughts for all of us about thinking about our mortality, our life. What does our life look like? I had David Young in here last week, and when I asked how COVID changed his business, he was like, actually, COVID really changed me, and I related to that so much. So what was COVID like for you? What was your experience professionally and personally?
So it was interesting. At the time, I was actually working for the court system. Mm-hmm. So I was a law clerk, which is basically an attorney for the judges.
Right.
And I was on a team that kind of helped the court transition to I don't want to say court closure because court's never closed,
Right.
but to, a virtual court experience. It was funny because I remember the day that the world shut down. I remember I was in my office and I'm thinking, they're not going to send us home. Like the courts are never closed, right? Court, if anything, it just always goes on, right? There are ways to file emergency things on the weekends if you need to.
Yeah.
The legal world just never stops. But lo and behold, we all got sent home. There was a period of time where we came back and then we got sent home again.
Yeah.
But it was really neat because I was able to serve on some teams about that were focusing on access to justice and to figure out unique and creative ways to make sure that during the pandemic, that people in underserved communities in our judicial district were able to access the courts.
Okay.
And a lot of the aftermath of that has continued. So we're still doing a lot of virtual court. I think for many people that has helped them, not have to take a day off of work to go and sit in the halls for 3 hours waiting for your case to be called.
Sure.
And so I think for a lot of people, access to the courts and their experience with the legal system has been improved, post-pandemic. And I was on a really incredible team of people that kind of helped make that happen. So that was a fun, kind of feather in my cap and a great time to really be solving a problem, which is something my brain loves to do.
Yeah. Well, and especially, it was a great time to distract your mind. As I said, a lot of us had too much time to think, at least initially. Which could lead you to some kind of dark places. But so it was always good to stay busy. But so what was it like for you personally during that time?
So, personally, it was a challenge for sure. In some ways, it was great. My husband and I actually, we were very close and didn't struggle with the kind of like being around each other so much. I know that for a lot of people that was tough.
Yeah.
For us, that actually was a positive thing. Except that during the pandemic, my husband got this big idea that he was going to become like a farmer and solve the like meat crisis that was coming for everyone.
Sure.
So it was like we got all these like meat chickens. We had a ton of egg layers. We got pigs.
Yeah.
At the time we also adopted some sheep from Lollipop Farm. We have a miniature donkey. It was literally a zoo at the house. And the funny thing is, like, we got involved in this kind of family farming project. And lo and behold, any true farmer will tell you, like, it's neither lucrative nor fun nor easy, or else everybody would be doing it.
Right.
But then John's business actually took off, right? People are home. They're not spending money. They're looking around at their patio saying, like, wow, I wish I had a nicer place to spend time out here right now. And so he had one of his most successful years during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then that left me to care for the farm sometimes by myself.
You became a farmhand.
Like getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning to get these farm chores done before starting my day as an attorney. It was a wild time. I think it just made coming out of that all the sweeter. So it was challenging. I will say that being home with your stress and your thoughts, it wasn't a stressful time for me from a career standpoint, but like a lot of people, consumption of alcohol and all of those things, like, when you're home and you have nothing else to do, that's something that's been a challenge. And I tend to be pretty open about my sobriety. I just recently passed the 2-year mark. So I'm a little over 2 years alcohol free. It's interesting. I don't know if I like to even use the word sober. I think that for a lot of people, that's such like a loaded term that, means something about what my life was like before.
Right.
I am someone who definitely, during the pandemic and otherwise used alcohol to calm my nerves.
Sure.
Generally at the end of a stressful workday, I'm all amped up and stressed about work or stressed about whatever client is struggling with something. And, coming home to that glass of wine just kind of helped me take the edge off. I would nag my husband less. And so I also found that, coping with marriage and all of the responsibilities of being a new wife was something that really accelerated my alcohol use.
Okay.
It's interesting because, I would drink a bunch of wine, go to bed. I wouldn't like fight with anybody. I wasn't like driving.
Yeah.
And then I would wake up the next day, bright-eyed, go to work. I had no issues there. So it wasn't something that was affecting my career per se, but I got to the point where, number one, I didn't like how I felt and how I looked. It was affecting, my weight and just everything from, I felt like I was like aging, my skin, my face. I look at before and after pictures, even literally 5 days from getting sober, like your eyes, the bags under your eyes, everything just kind of changes.
Puffiness in your face.
All of it. Yeah.
You don't notice it till it's gone.
Until it's gone. It's true. And honestly, like it got to the point where I was just looking at my life and saying, I'm one of these people that's drinking the poison and expecting the other person to die, like drinking because of other people's problems,
right?
And harming myself and my body and potentially my family, my relationships, and those things had it gotten, to a worse point that it didn't make sense anymore. So I decided to cut it out. I'm not someone who, goes to meetings or anything like that. I think that program is incredible for people who need that. But for me, just like cutting alcohol was such a gift.
Yeah.
Just learning that my life could be so much better without it.
Yeah.
Something I would have never imagined. I was always that girl who had the glass of wine in her hand,
Girl, me too.
1 or 2 ahead of my friends, Yeah. And it just, having one less thing to kind of, I don't know, like blur things, make a mess, just like one more thing to worry about, one more thing to think about at all, when like, oh, I wonder where we're going to go for dinner tonight. Where can I go and have a good glass of wine? It was just like something that was always on my mind. And now I've, freed that space up in my head to think about other better things. So
it's amazing that you use the word free, because that was my thought. Is I always thought that, because I don't like to use the word sober either, because even every once in a while I will have a glass of wine or something, but I don't drink maybe once a year. But I had this idea that not drinking meant something restrictive, when really it was the most freeing thing that I think I ever did for myself, because, as they say, discipline is the ultimate freedom. It's like I'm choosing something and I don't have, it was almost like a monkey wrench in everything that I was doing. It was like this bad actor in things that I had to kind of work around. And like you say, it hadn't progressed into, legal problems or family problems or things, but there is a path, unfortunately, with me going down a little too far down the wrong one. I can tell you, it doesn't get better.
Right.
Things tend to get darker. And, I think that it's really incredible that you had the insight to say, you know what, I think it's time. I think it's time to step back. And like I say, I felt such a sense of freedom to not be tied down by this thing and actually feel in control a little bit. I know we're not in control as much as I'd like us to be, but to have control over that instead of being controlled by it was just really powerful for me. So you experienced kind of the same thing?
Absolutely. And I remember, there were times like every time Lent would come around, I'd be like, oh, all right, God, like, you can have my swear words. You can have all the chocolate. Like, just don't take my wine, you know? And then you start to realize, like, are you kidding? Like, is this thing that important? And why is it that important? And so, I agree that when I gave it up, I don't know. I have a lot of people in my life who have said, like, well, oh, you're intelligent. Like, you could moderate, you could be someone who can just have a glass here and there. I probably could. But the effort for me to kind of find my way through moderation, it just was easier for me to just draw a line for myself. At the time, I was doing like the Noom app, trying to get, a little more fit, lose a little weight post-pandemic. And it would say like, oh, you can have, 4 ounces. And I was like, well, I don't know if I'd rather have like...
Why bother?
If I can't have 8, I'd rather have none. And for me, I was like, all right, well, if I have to choose these things, like I would much rather have some cheese and crackers or like a bowl of Cinnamon Toast Crunch instead of 4 ounces of wine. And then I'm thinking to myself, like, just cut it, Jessica, you can do it. And I'm so competitive that for me, that like daily tally, I love it. It motivates me to just like keep doing it just to prove to myself that I can, because it's something I absolutely thought I could never do.
Yeah, no, I can totally relate. And the thing of it is, too, is like you said, and there are a lot of people who are not problematic drinkers and they are perfectly fine. And so I'm not talking to you. But it is so pushed in our culture. Oh, yeah. And that was another thing that I just realized so much when I stopped drinking was how like how normal it is for judges, teachers to be like, oh my God, I need to get drunk this weekend. I need to go home and have a glass of wine. And like they would be like, I remember in a courtroom seeing all of these sad cases come in, and a lot of them, the problems were centered around drugs or alcohol.
Sure.
And then hearing some of the coworkers in the courthouse be like, oh, I can't wait to go home and have a drink. And it was just an interesting thing because it's like I say, it's not problematic for everybody, but it's just such a norm in people's lives. And there's alcoholism and addiction in my family. And I remember my mom reminding me of that all the time, and my brother when we were younger. And she would say to me, she's like, Christine, you just don't know when you're going to cross that line. But once you do, you can't go back.
Right.
And I had that in the back of my mind the whole time, but I'm like, the line is like 10 years away. Like, it'll be fine. But it really can just creep up on you. And, you know, it's just, I can't imagine having that in my life and functioning. I know I couldn't function the way that I am now. I mean, I have an early wake up time. I have a disciplined bedtime routine.
Right.
I think so much about self-care, and like I watch my Fitbit. I know when I'm dehydrated. Like it just doesn't jive with
It's true.
a drinking lifestyle. So, I mean, have you replaced it with any habits or different things that, you know, to kind of fill that gap?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a bit of a Peloton freak.
Okay.
And actually that was like one of the kind of lights that was going off in my head too, because I would say like, okay, I'm going to draw this line where I'm going to be able to have wine after I go on the Peloton. So like, if I go on the bike, then I can have wine after.
Yep.
And then I started telling myself, oh, it was like a really hard Tuesday, so I'm just going to make an exception. I'm like, you know, Jessica, you can't even follow your own rules. And it's really interesting because, so first of all, there's an incredible sober community online out there for every type of thing.
Yes.
But there is a really active sober Peloton group.
Okay.
And so I interact with those folks a lot on Facebook. And when you're on the Peloton, you have kind of like your leaderboard name, and then you can have like a hashtag, so like a group that you ride with. And I ride under the Sober Squad hashtag. And it's really fun and interesting because the amount of times that I am riding, and it'll show you like the 10 people that are nearest you in this, you know, race, so to speak.
Yeah.
People will have like Petals for Wine, like Margaritas Later. That's like their leaderboard name.
Wow.
And I'll be in a group with like 6 out of 10 people who have like an alcohol related Peloton name.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to me because I always wonder like, what do they think when they see, you know, maybe someday they'll be riding under the Sober Squad, you know, and
They might cross over.
Yeah. And there's nothing that makes me more excited. This is such like a jerk thing to say, but nothing that makes me more excited than when I like blow past.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, because I'm the sober one. I've got more energy, you know.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of conceited, but it's just a fun thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, my father, he's 39 years sober. And so getting sober also, you know, made me, you know, so much closer with him and helped me develop an understanding for things that, you know, that I wouldn't have really ever known in terms of, you know, what he might have been through in life. And I think it also, as a legal practitioner dealing with families who are affected by substance use, which seems to be like 9 out of 10 cases, I'm able to approach things with a little bit more understanding, a little more compassion. I'm able to have conversations with parents sometimes about, you know, how things changed for me when I decided to stop drinking. And, you know, we're foster parents. We don't have an active foster care placement right now, but I didn't want to be that like junk mommy, right? Like that culture of let me put wine in my sippy
mom.
cup. It's just, I just knew that I had so much to lose and I just didn't want to take those chances.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big decision that has absolutely affected my life in only good ways. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned that you're foster parents, and if for some reason you don't want to go here, we can edit this out. But I know that you shared online at one point too that you had gone through some fertility treatments and you went down a long, and I would imagine from my own experience, devastating road in that realm. And so now you guys are looking into adoption. I mean, share a little bit about what that's been like for you, if you're willing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was diagnosed with endometriosis a couple years before I met my husband, actually. And so there was a period of time where I was trying on my own because I was kind of counseled and told like your chances might already be difficult. So, that was something I was going through the IUI and IVF process as a single person, which was really a unique kind of decision to make.
Yeah.
And then I met John and, kind of play the tape forward. We get married and decide to, pursue that. And so the IVF route, it's so hard on the body and the mind. The amount of medications that you're taking, the stress of it, the grief.
Yeah.
Again, alcohol played such a big role in that. Mm-hmm. I wish that I had gotten sober sooner because I didn't really know how that was affecting my hormones too. I mean, it was actually mind blowing. The cycle that I did after I got sober had like a fourth of the medications that I was taking for years for, every time that we tried. And had I known, and it's so difficult because like I said, you're grieving and then you're finding some way to cope.
Yeah.
So there, we have closed the book on that. I've had to make some decisions for myself that are really hard.
Yeah.
Deciding that, having a biological child of my own is just not something that at this time I feel is going to be in my future because I had to say, look, Jessica, like your body, it's just done enough. It got to the point where like, I couldn't even, have them take blood out of the same part of my arm because like the veins have so much scar tissue. It was just kind of like enough's enough. I felt like I was like in this rented body.
Yeah.
And, at the time, from an entrepreneurship standpoint, I had a job with the court system. I had great health insurance. So there are certainly reasons why, not working for yourself during a process like that can be beneficial. I don't know that I could have been going through all of that and done it on my own. But, like I said, we hope to adopt. I think that's something that we're open to. And the foster care process is unique in that there are no guarantees. So we could say we would love to adopt a child, but at the same time, the purpose of foster care is never, it never starts that way. And so I feel like there are definitely kids out there who are meant to be in our home and who are meant to receive the love that we have to give, but who are then meant to go, back home to their families.
Yeah.
And so if we never adopt a child, like I think I will be perfectly okay with that.
Yeah.
And I think just kind of trusting God, trusting the universe that whatever comes our way, whatever's meant for you will not pass you by. I think that's advice that at times is really hard to remind yourself of, right?
Yeah.
But also the unique thing is I think I'm someone that tends to overshare. Like I think most people who come into contact with me know about, my IVF journey, my sober journey, all kinds of other personal things that my family and I have gone through. Mm-hmm. And the reason I tend to be that way is, like we talked about, life is hard and people are going through life feeling alone. And I like to think that sharing some uncomfortable, very personal things might result in someone saying like, you know what, maybe you should talk to Jessica. She might have some thoughts about that. She's been through something similar. Or maybe someone, like I said, will just hear me, blabbing about my business and just feel like they're less alone in the world. And, if that's something I can kind of sprinkle around while I go through life, then that's a good thing.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that so much. I mean, I 1000% agree. I'm such an oversharer. If you've listened to the show, I feel bad for my family sometimes, but the truth is that everybody is dealing with some version of something that comes up here. And, I think that holds people back and they think to themselves like, well, I can't do this because I have this issue or I have this in my past. Or otherwise I would chase my dream. And it's like, no, those things do not disqualify you from the life that you want. And you sharing the IVF thing. So Brad and I didn't go through IVF. We actually had to make a decision before even getting to the point of committing to having children. I have endometriosis as well as a litany of diagnoses, but things got so unmanageable that, I was on, I think it was like 14 different hormones over the course of a few years. And I can relate so much to just the havoc that happens to your body. I didn't recognize who I was on the outside or the inside, really. I didn't even know what I wanted anymore. And I was growing my business at this time. And hysterectomy kept kind of lingering in the background as an option. And there was like, I didn't even know that I wanted children per se, but it was almost like, but you're a female, you have to have children. I just felt like, oh God, it's something I've got to do at some point. Like, I can't think about it now, but I have to, right? And, so it was like this pressure that wasn't even from me. And it wasn't from my parents either. They were never the type of like, okay, you're married, when's it going to happen? But, it got to the point where hysterectomy was the best treatment option. And God bless my husband. I mean, he just said to me, he's like, I feel like we're holding out for this hypothetical thing, but we're missing out on life right now. And, and it was such a painful thing to think about. But that was the choice that we made. And he was, more certain than I was at the time. And what was crazy is that when I remember waking up in the hospital after my hysterectomy, and I had a full-blown panic attack because I was like, oh my God, it's gone. Like, it's gone. There's no going back. And I'll just never forget that moment. But, since then, I've done a lot of self-reflection and realized that being a mother is not for me. We had thought about adoption, but I don't think that being a mother is for me. But I do think that in this age of technology and podcasting and business and just connecting with people, I want to impact people in other ways. And I think, your work that you do as a law guardian or attorney for the child, I think they call it now, and being a foster mom, I mean, it sounds like you have kind of come to a similar realization of like, there are other ways to impact lives and change lives and be fulfilled other than being a mother. And that's a hard thing to say out loud sometimes. But, I think I've gotten to a place, I've had 2 Mother's Days in a row now that I haven't cried. So we're on a hot streak now. So, it's progress. But I think it's so important to have these conversations because, there are so many women that I know right now that are either unable to get pregnant or their spouse doesn't want children and they didn't know.
Right.
I mean, there's just so many things that people go through. And I think it's important to talk about the struggle of wanting children and also the fact that it's okay maybe if you don't go down that road,
Right. And I think the really important thing to remember is that, nothing is permanent. You're right. Technology, things change. I could be 60 years old and foster an infant. It doesn't, things don't have to happen on the time and generally don't happen on the timeline that I want and need them to.
Yeah.
I think, I have a great therapist and I think every adult should. And something that I'm always focusing on is like, what's the right decision? What's the right thing to do? And the answer is always like the right thing is the thing that you choose.
Yeah.
This constant fear of regret is something that I am always struggling with. Mm-hmm. But the choice I'm making now is the right choice for me right now.
Yeah.
And then you can always change your mind, you know. And it's the same with entrepreneurship. I might decide tomorrow that taking some job is the right thing and nothing's permanent. You can always turn it around. You can always decide to change your mind and do what you need to do.
Yeah. Well, and having that strong foundation and taking care of your mind, taking care of your body, all of those things, having a good partner, all of that is a foundation so that there isn't a wrong decision because you're going to figure it out either way. Right. And so that's just like a very comforting place to be.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, and so do you have any personal or professional goals for the next few years or next 10 years?
That's interesting. I'm always toying with the idea of, running for judge or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's hard to know, if that's something that is what's right for me, because again, you have to really consider how that affects your family life and your time.
Yeah.
I don't know. Being in politics sounds extremely overwhelming. Yeah. And I mean, the benefit is, I've already told my business to everyone all over the internet and all over a podcast.
It's out there, guys.
Yeah, exactly. You're not finding anything that I haven't already put out there. But at the same time, like you said, there are ways to influence families, from the other side. It's really hard for me to imagine not doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And I think, the hard part is also that you start to build this momentum. And that was one of the reasons that I ended up not kind of choosing that banking job I mentioned, because, I finally am in a system where, things are going smoothly. Like
Right.
I've got my billing down and all of my timekeeping and the way that I manage my calendar. And, it takes some time to get back into
Sure.
that rhythm.
Yeah.
And so considering taking any job, it's that makes it a difficult decision. So it's interesting. I guess I'm at the point lately where I'm trying not to plan so far ahead.
Yeah.
Because I am a planner, extraordinaire.
Yeah.
I'm someone who I think has always been obsessed with what my future looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And for right now, I'm just kind of happy focusing on today.
Yeah.
Which, for me is something that is new and different.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're in a really good place. And I think, you're in your 30s, right?
I'm turning 40 in January.
Almost 40. Okay, I love it. Queens are born in January. Me too.
Yes.
It sounds like you're just in a season of your life where you've had a little bit of experience, and I think it sounds like you're just in a place where you're comfortable. You've got this good momentum going, and it is difficult to recreate momentum. You are right about that. But, you don't always have to have things planned out, because as you and I both have said, you could have all the plans in the world and things aren't going to work out
Correct.
that way.
Right.
So it sounds like you're in a really great place. And one other thing I wanted to ask you about is I have seen that you've been sharing some of your paintings that you've created. So it sounds like, is this a new outlet that you found, or is this something you've been passionate about for a long time?
In high school, I was really involved in art. I feel like I was like that art kid in high school. And I think that was something that I was really talented at the time, too. It was something that I always really enjoyed doing. And it's no surprise that being an attorney is not really a very creative career at all.
Yeah.
And so I got to the point where, like we said, life is really hard. And I found that being involved with the arts was something that it was like one of the few things that when I have a paintbrush in my hand or I'm working with clay, I can't think about anything else.
Yeah.
I can't answer my phone. And so lately I've been taking oil painting lessons at the Pat Rainey Roar Gallery in Canandaigua.
Okay.
My teacher is Steve Bondurant. He's fantastic. I've been doing that every Wednesday now. Gosh, I don't know, maybe 6, 8, 10 months. And it's just been the greatest thing for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like the more stressed I get, the better my paintings are.
Oh, as an artist, I can tell you 100% that is true.
Yeah. So yeah, when they're not so good, like, that's a good indicator that life is going just fine.
Yep.
When they start to get really good, maybe check on me, make sure I'm doing okay.
You okay,
I feel like
Jessica?
that about like physical stuff too. Everyone's like, you look great. I'm like, oh, I'm a mess inside. I'm just overcompensating. So, that's always a red flag as well.
Yep.
But yeah, being involved in creative things, I think has just made me feel really great. I think that is some huge advice for entrepreneurs. You've got to have a hobby. You've got to have some way to turn it off. And it's really hard, like you said, to kind of create these boundary lines, to take time off for yourself.
Yes.
And so for me, I have to schedule it in order for that to happen.
Yeah.
If I wasn't taking a class, I would not be taking, 3 hours on a Wednesday to do it myself in an art room at home.
Yep.
And so, making that a scheduled priority is something that has been really, really good for my mental health.
Yeah.
And, who knows, maybe I'll sell a bunch of paintings down the road. Again, it's that whole, I know that if I was painting for a living, I wouldn't enjoy it the way I do.
It wouldn't be the same. Yeah.
It's a treat that I reward myself with. It's something I look forward to.
Yeah.
It breaks up my week. It's been really, really terrific.
That's amazing. Yeah. And it's such a contrast to law, like you say.
Yeah.
So it's so nice that, you've discovered these other parts of yourself. And it sounds like you're just someone who's very open to change and open to kind of all the things that life can throw at you, and just go with it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to describe me. I certainly try to just soak up anything good these days and just find the joy wherever you can. And if that's in little bits at a time, then so be it.
Yeah. And we're bringing back YOLO, because I think that's really good. I think we all need to do a little bit more of that.
Absolutely.
Well, I've got some rapid fire questions for you. I try to switch them up a little bit every week, since a lot of the guests that we have on are listeners as well. So We will just kick these off. You can answer them briefly, one sentence, one paragraph. What does being successful mean to you right now?
Wow, that's a tough one. I think I define success as finding balance in my life. Finding ways to prioritize my career in a way that fulfills me, but doesn't necessarily focus on everyone else's needs. And also maintaining, healthy relationships with my friends and my family, my husband, my stepson. Finding that balance, I think, is something that helps me feel successful.
Yeah, that's great. What would you say is your biggest strength?
Oh, that's a fun question. I think, my uncle recently told me that I have a habit, a tendency, a gift maybe to kind of dust myself off and find ways to what I call fail forward.
Yeah.
I think, we all go through things in life that totally suck and that, like you said, interrupt our great plans.
Yep.
A lot of times life feels totally unfair.
Yeah.
But I'm a firm believer that you can find a way to make the negatives and make the hard times work for you so that you can make those things, benefit you in some way.
Yeah.
Find ways to use those hard times to help propel yourself. Nothing is wasted in life,
Right.
You can make the most out of a bad situation. And that's advice that I give a lot of my clients, especially like my juvenile delinquent clients. They're sometimes placed in homes where they don't want to be, where they don't feel like they should be. And I always just tell them, like, just find a way to make it work for you.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to use that to your benefit someday.
Yeah. Get through it. Ed Milet is, do you listen to him at all?
No, I don't.
He's fantastic. He has a podcast and he always says things don't happen to you, they happen for you, because it's not the things that happen to you that have it's the meaning you attach to that situation and,
Right.
and what you do next that matters most. So I agree. What is something that you're working on right now? Could be working on yourself, working in your career.
Well, my husband and I are actually kind of in the process of flipping some houses. So,
Ooh.
yeah. So John has, kind of been considering whether transitioning, his own entrepreneurship journey is a good thing. And kind of diversifying a little. Being able to kind of flip a house is something that is a fun project that we can do together.
Yeah.
We've been really trying to find something that we can do as a team, a project that we're working on together instead of having these kind of separate, career paths. And so one property we're working on hopefully will be an awesome Airbnb, kind of Finger Lakes wine trail vibes. And, well, I guess I should say like cheese trail, I'm not,
Yeah.
here I am buying into the wine culture. Right.
Yeah.
But I think that again, like, helps us be creative. It's a fun kind of problem solving thing. So who knows, maybe we'll have some, real estate umpire before long.
Can't wait to see it. Okay. This will be our first fill in the blank. Are you ready?
I do love a good math.
The biggest lesson that I have learned in the past few years is
Always just be nice to people.
Yeah.
I try to approach life assuming the best in people. If someone's driving really slow in front of me, they probably have like some homemade wedding cake in the trunk.
Right.
They can't take the turn as fast as I want them to, It's one of the first things I think I learned in law school is like, always be nice to the receptionists. And, these are the gatekeepers of the world. Like we said, everybody's going through something.
Yep.
And if you just approach people with the understanding of, we're all just doing our best with what we have and what we're going through.
Yeah.
I think that will always serve you. You never know if you're going to like show somebody half a peace sign while you're driving and you're on your way to something work related, like that person might end up parking next to you and like could be the producer at the podcast where you're about to show up to. So you'll never regret just being kind to people.
Yeah. So you flipped off Paul on your way here is what you're saying.
Only in my mind. Just kidding.
Well, I think that is tremendous advice. And so I'm so grateful to you for being here today and for sharing so much of your story. I think I think there's so much value for people, and I hope if anybody wants to follow your journey and see the real estate empire and everything you have coming down the future, where can we follow you?
Oh, interesting. So I don't really incorporate a lot of my like career life and whatnot, but a lot of my personal updates are on my Instagram. It's Oh Hello Jessie.
Okay.
And so I also have Sober Daughter. It's a separate Instagram page that kind of has incorporated my sober journey.
Okay.
It's not something I update very often. It's more of something that I engage with to kind of interact with the sober community.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of information on there, from the early days of getting sober that I think is really fun.
Yeah.
Almost like an interactive journal of sorts.
That's great.
So if anyone ever, wants to reach out, I'm always happy to interact and to talk with people about my journey.
That's fantastic. It's so nice to have someone, if you're going through something and you need to reach out, Jessica would be a great person to do that too. So
Thanks.
Thank you so much for being here. And I wish you nothing but the best over the next year. And hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
I'm sure. Thank you.
So thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share and like and follow us on all the socials. Thanks for watching and listening. Be sure to follow us on all the socials: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook.